So if we kind of talked about what virtue ethics does, we may still ask the question, what exactly is virtue? We think about things like virtue, but is there actually a good definition? Well, right, the book gives you that definition. In fact, if you're using the book that we've got right here, page 153 says it is a stable disposition to act and feel according to some ideal or model of excellence, right? That's a great sounding thing, but what does it mean? So, in general, stable disposition. What do we mean by stable disposition? Well, this is a considered set of acts that we have built up over time, right? This is a stable disposition, meaning that it is relatively immobile. We have become consistent, and it's something that we don't deviate from very often. Basically, it's this idea that once we've built up the muscles for something, as long as we continue to practice it, it remains a stable disposition. In which case, again, going back to those ideas of being brave, of being honest, of being empathetic, right? That when we build our muscles up of being empathetic, right, which is definitely a virtue, we would consider that to be our default position. Again, let's take a look at empathy and see what happens if we have too much empathy. If we have too much empathy, is that a good thing? Well, a lot of people would say, right, can you have too much empathy for things? Well, maybe. We also need to be wise with our empathy, in sympathizing with, in thinking about a situation and wanting to be empathetic and wanting to understand somebody's position and to feel for them. Are we in a dangerous position if we allow ourselves to be taken care of? If we do not see that there are people who have gotten themselves into situations that we may be better off staying away from. That if we know that somebody continues to make the same mistakes and we've offered our empathy, at a certain point we must withdraw from these people because otherwise we may be taken advantage of, right? And of course, a lack of empathy, clearly, right? A lack of empathy would be not caring really at all when people are suffering at all and saying that everybody needs to just take care of their own business, right? And if we strike that balance, though, we can see how to empathize with people, how to help them, but also how to not get caught up in either too much or too little. Our stable disposition, right? The one that we think of, the one that is literally sort of understood as virtue, is that middle position where we do empathize with people, but not to the point where we let them take advantage of us, but also not so little that we refuse to help people, right? And so that stable disposition, right, to act and feel according to some ideal or model of excellence, well, that would be the ideal model of excellence in this case. Empathy would be the caring and feeling as if people are worth our time, right, and worth helping. The caring, which is that model of excellence, if done to excess, leads us to perhaps being taken advantage of, and if done not enough, will lead to us being stingy, will lead to us being unsympathetic towards people in any case, right? Virtue ethics is really this idea of the golden mean that Aristotle brings up, where he wants us to have that balance, to strike it, right? Is there any virtue in which there cannot be too much of it? We might think honesty. Honesty might be one of those virtues that we think, well, we can definitely have too little, right, and be not trustworthy, but can we be too honest? This is tricky, right? I would like, of course, for you as a student in this ethics class to consider that, right? Is there a place where too much honesty could be a problem? Could we be at risk of telling the truth too much? Well, if you pause the video, you don't have to, right? But if you want to think about it for a second, you can pause the video, and I'll give you a second to do that if you want, and then we'll sort of pick back up and think about that. All right, so if you paused, great. If not, that was a weird, awkward silence. It's fine. Can you have too much honesty? I do think so, right? I think that discretion is part of honesty. Being honest with people is important, but also knowing when to not hurt people with truth, right? Aristotle points out that there are probably models, people that we might know or people that we might have found throughout history, or the ideal person that we might have created, right, who would have a good answer for us about what the right type of honesty to have would be. If we take those examples, for example, let's just take our classic Christian example of Jesus. What kind of honesty would Jesus want from us? Now, we may, of course, run into some difficulty with this because depending on our background and upbringing, we might think, well, we would never lie. Jesus would never just lie to people. That seems like it would be sinful. But are there times as well when instead of just simply going ahead and saying exactly the thing that we may have said to people when they said something terrible to us, he says something like, turn the other cheek. He doesn't say lie to people, but he says, withhold your speech from time to time, right? Be moderate with the way that you speak, and that may be a good choice, right? That the truth is a good thing, but sometimes saying nothing at all when it's not necessary is a great thing, right? That may be the model of virtue that we would have for ourselves. We may also, if we don't have that kind of tradition, have people in our lives that we may hold up as, examples of honesty, right? My grandfather, for example, was a very honest person, but the honesty and truth was for those people who were going to do well with it, who were going to need it. He was somebody who would say from time to time, you don't waste the truth on somebody who isn't going to be willing to hear it or to do anything with it. That there are people that you simply wish a good day and say, this truth would be wasted on you. You don't want to hear what I have to say. There would be no point in it, right? I think that is important, right? Again, when we're talking about virtue, when we're talking about these stable dispositions, these golden means, that's really what we're talking about here. So, what are the benefits to a virtue theory over something like a Kantian theory, over something like a utilitarian theory? Well, in the next video, we'll talk about that.